Okay. Well, hello, everybody. I hope everybody is having a good day, a good Saturday. I myself am having a pretty decent Saturday, all things considered. Was out, went to lunch at the Longhorn Steakhouse. They have the best deal in town for hamburgers. You get a big hamburger for $9. It's not bad. So I took my wife and I out there, and we had that. And then we went to Target and picked up a couple of things. And before you know it, it was time to come back and sit down here and do the live stream. So, at any rate, hopefully everybody had a good week. Last couple of weeks have been pretty busy for me. I have re-injured my back somehow, and so I have been having to take all kinds of mostly anti-inflammatory stuff, although occasionally a muscle relaxer. And when I take a muscle relaxer, I'm goofier than a pet coon. Let me tell you, it just knocks me on my behind. But I've discovered something yesterday, in fact, that helped more than almost anything. Our daughter is working on becoming an integrative medicine physician. She's already a board certified pediatrician, but now she has taken these additional courses to become integrative medicine. And one of the things that she's integrating into medicine is acupuncture. And she put about 12 needles into me, and no, you don't feel the needles go in. I'm being honest with you, you just don't. And within 15 minutes, the pain that was in my back, the muscle tightness, all of that was gone. So, if you have a physician in your area who practices acupuncture and you have some kind of back injury, I would certainly recommend seeking them out because it certainly helped me. So somebody asked if I could share my thoughts about the Nancy Guthrie case. And what I can share, the thoughts I can share are that the media is back to being its usual self and jumping the gun, naming people as suspects who are not suspects, um, just doing all kinds of things that actually probably hinder the investigation more than they help it. Um, That's how journalists get paid. I mean, they get paid by getting views, and they get views by virtue of sometimes doing outrageous things. I think law enforcement comes to expect that, but it doesn't help when you've got an elderly person like Nancy Guthrie who has not got her medication. She's been kidnapped. She's probably under a great deal of stress, and they haven't got very many leads, I guess, at this point, and that troubles me. You know, now that the FBI is involved, it's a federal crime because even though I believe the way it works is after more than 24 hours, it's assumed that they've been taken across state lines, so it becomes a federal investigation. And generally, there are a lot of law enforcement organizations that you can beat in this country, but the FBI isn't one of them. And I don't know why anybody'd try. So at some point, they're going to come to the place where they have these people, and that will be a good day for justice. So let's see who's here. No way I'm on time. Yes, you are. Baker Canner, am I dreaming? Did I really catch you live? No, you're not dreaming. It's real. Back issues are the worst. Oh, no kidding. It's awful. Is integrative medicine blending Eastern and Western medicine? Yes, among other things, including things like hypnosis. It's and there's a board for it. There's a board of physicians that practice integrative medicine. So, essentially the quality is thereby regulated. Again, it's a great thing. Uh, and I've certainly had a really good experience with it. So, I invited questions, and the next kind of thing on my list was the Banfield case, and I got a really great question. And I'm not going to identify the person who sent it because they didn't give me that permission, but I'm going to read to you what they wrote. Thank you for pointing out the mutually assured destruction of both Brendan and Juliana shooting Joseph Ryan. I'm surprised that no one that I watch has brought that up besides you. Well, I I mean, it just made sense. There was absolutely no reason for her to fire a shot if he had been shot in the head. There's no reason for that. And so I do believe that the reason that he had her do that was so she'd be on the hook too. And if everything fell apart, she couldn't very well throw him under the bus because she fired a potentially fatal shot too. So, a lot of things occur to people, but they don't wind up getting into their videos either because something more urgent comes up or because at some point we have to stop filming and edit the thing. And man, editing can be quite a process. Since I have added things like timestamps and a little bit longer descriptions to my videos, it adds about 20 to 25 minutes to each video just to get that part done. So, can't blame other people for not coming up with that, although I thought it was fairly, easy to understand. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they didn't see it that way. So, question one, I can't figure out if Mr. Carroll was just trying to get evidence to fit his narrative or if he legitimately didn't understand it. For example, he never seemed to understand what catfishing is. I'll finish the rest of this second in a second, but when people like Mr. Carroll and I were younger, catfishing was done with a fishing pole and stink bait, and you threw that stuff in a pond and you waited to get lucky. And I guess in modern day catfishing, you're still fishing and looking to get lucky, just in a completely different way. I can assure you that Mr. Carroll does not have a copy of the Urban Dictionary, so he probably didn't know what catfishing really was. Was he trying to create doubt in the theory, or did he really not get it? In closing, he said, "You heard Mr. Litsky opine as an expert that catfishing is not a scheme where one talks about their husband or talks about how's your experience on this site. The catfishing in the truest form of the government's theory is we just want to get someone on the hook, and then that person's going to come in, and then we're going to do what we did in here in the house. It's not consistent with catfishing." Well, it's pretty clear he doesn't understand the state's theory, that's for sure, and he may not understand the use of the term catfishing. And again, that's probably due to the way he grew up. Um, let's see. I wanted to catch up with the comments here. Uh, excellent point. Hi, I imagine my surprise. I agree that I have believed that also. I've had 4 back surgeries, possibly going to have a 5th. Oh, Lisa, that's terrible. Back surgeries are no fun. I sympathize with her and feel like he manipulated her a lot. I think she's talking about Brendan there. And absolutely, I think that's true. Good catfishing is still done with stink bait. That's absolutely true. Um, Alienated sharpness. She fired the fatal shot. I was just rewatching the Amy's testimony, but I don't remember her saying Brendan told her to do it. Well, maybe not at that time, but Brendan, more likely than not, insisted that she do it. He was shot in the head. It wasn't like he was going to stand up and, do that little scene from Young Frankenstein, where he's going to put on the Ritz. So uh, I do think, again, it was fatal only in the sense that it was the thing that stopped his heart. The head wound would likely have done that at some point. Um, why wouldn't one of his younger counterparts clue him in? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Did she carry the gun into the room or did she open the safe? There are some real gaps in the evidence in terms of that. I don't know how she got the combination to the safe unless he gave it to her, or perhaps, he armed her before they went up. I don't think pretty much I don't think her recitation of the events about the gun and his recitation of the events about the gun, I don't think either one of them are true to what actually happened. Again, I think you have to do a little mental interpolation there to kind of figure out in the middle where things fall. Um, um, so imagine my surprise says, "This is my email. You can identify me." And that's nice of you. Thank you. It's a very good email, as we're going to find out. Um, The he says it's not consistent with catfishing, but that's exactly what it's doing. I mean, they're luring this guy in, and they're luring him with the promise of intimate contact, shall we say? And then, surprise, when he gets there, instead, he gets high velocity lead poisoning. And that's that's pretty much consistent with a catfishing theory. Let's see, I hate to say imagine my surprise every time, but um, imagine my surprise goes on. She says, he asked vague questions that sounded more like a student trying to understand a topic without understanding enough to know what slash how to ask. And yeah, kind of like the kid that didn't really read Tom Sawyer and is opining about, latex versus vinyl paints on fences. It's that kind of thing. I do think I think his preparation for this trial was not up to speed, and I think his performance at the trial was not up to speed, but I do believe that he was doing his level best. And I don't I think that a lot of this stuff just went by him. He clearly there were things he did not grasp. She goes on to say he contradicted himself. In closing argument, he said that Detective Smith came up and she told you that the catfish theory started within weeks of the event. Regarding Detective Miller's executive summary, essentially he's going to have to change this report because it needs to conform with the proffer of Juliana. That's twice now, two different people that I called to the stand that essentially confirms that everything changes when she comes in and testifies. Juliana's role, has grown in importance for this case. It's along with Deputy Chief Brush and Lieutenant Gallo. She's pushing it on through her deal. It's hard to follow, but I think counsel was speaking about Detective Miller that he conclusively said the entire catfishing theory changed upon her plea deal. I don't think that's right. Do you think the defense could have used this effectively if they had presented it differently? That's a good question. If Juliana hadn't turned, they might have been able to use it effectively. But Juliana flipped, and um, if he had done a better job of going after her on cross examination, then again, he might very well have gotten away with it. And of course, if he hadn't testified in his own defense, he might have gotten away with it. But I do believe it could have been presented much better and much differently. See, this is one of the benefits that plaintiffs lawyers have in that they do mock trials. They do focus groups so that they can take a look at how they're presenting the evidence and what approaches work best when they present the evidence. Most of the time in a criminal trial, they don't have that luxury. Now, if you've got someone like Alec Baldwin who can afford to pay a huge law firm tons of money to come up with a defense, yeah, absolutely, you can do that. But in this case, they didn't have the ability, I don't think, to do that. Um, Good evening from Finland. All right. Any exciting cases coming up? Well, yeah, there are several. Kori Richins is coming up, and that'll be a really interesting. Um, Such a classic movie, Young Frankenstein. Yeah, I saw a little piece of that the other day with the putting on the Ritz part of Young Frankenstein. It's just one of the many Mel Brooks movies that I love. That and uh, The Producers, which has that crazy number about springtime for Hitler. Uh, I can't tell you how funny. I mean, that's rolling on the floor laughing if you ask me. Let's see. I don't understand why they arrested Juliana first and then waited so long for Brendan. That's easy to understand. The reason they arrested Juliana first is because Juliana would probably, I mean, you look at the situation, it's pretty obvious that Brendan manipulated Juliana. So the state just wanted their turn. And when you put somebody in a little 10 by 8 cell and the only other people they have to talk to are other criminals who are going to tell her how awful prison is, how long she's going to be there, and all of the terrible things that happen in prison, the cops really don't have to question her. They just have to let her stay in there long enough for her to realize, "Hey, I didn't sign up for this." And the rest pretty much does what it has to do. I think that for the most part, Juliana flipped because she was effectively scared to death to wind up in an American prison. And that's why they arrested her first, because they knew they could use her to get to Brendan. Uh, Good evening from the UK. Good evening right back. That's right, would be evening there. It's 6 hours ahead or 5 hours ahead from here. Um, Kori Richins' trial is supposed to be fire. Yeah, it certainly is. It'll be interesting, that's for sure. Again, all these people who come up with these complex schemes to uh, deliver themselves from marriage, shall we say, um, it doesn't make sense to me. I don't know how you ever expect to get away with it. I hope the Georgia trial is over before the Richins starts. Watching two trials at the same time is tough, but I'll do it. Well, um, what I would advise is if the Georgia trial is not over by that time, that we probably all move over to the Richins trial because it will be far more interesting and a lot longer. And there'll be a lot more interesting evidentiary points as well as just argument that will be a lot more interesting to follow. Um, and I do think that the state's case is fairly close to wrapping up in Faust. I mean, there are a few more witnesses, I guess they have to go in front of the jury, but not too many. And I think hers doesn't start until I have to check. If somebody knows when it starts, let me know. I think it's the 26th, but I don't remember whether it's 26th of February or the 26th of March. Um, Juliana said she had the gun in her pocket from the get-go, but their story was that she got the firearm from his safe after the confrontation began. Yeah, that's much closer to my recollection of it. Um, Kori Richins will be an absolute circus. That's right. Blazing Saddles. Oh yeah, that's the campfire scene from Blazing Saddles is still one of the funniest ones I've ever seen. Do you think Brendan would have had a better chance with a different lawyer? Yes, I do. You swap out John Carroll for the guy from the or for the Adrian Gonzalez trial, the Hood, Nico the Hood, or AJ I'm sorry, Alan Jackson. Again, you've got probably a different result. 9:14 here in the UK. Yeah, it gets late there quick. That whole one of the things I love about time, just one of the things that you learn when you're in the military is Zulu time, which is Greenwich Mean Time, and of course Greenwich is in England, so obviously, time sort of starts and ends in England. So, uh, time flies when you're having fun. I don't think Brendan would have been found innocent with a different lawyer, but his lawyer was questionable for sure. Yeah. He was questionable, but he wasn't constitutionally ineffective. I think that's pretty clear. Starts February 23rd for opening statements. Well, uh, definitely I will be there for that one. Uh, that's good. Thank you. It was a really moronic plan, and I don't know how he thought he'd get away with it. I wonder if he's sorry he didn't just get a divorce. I always wonder that. I wonder if they're sorry afterwards that they didn't think about the consequences or what the consequences might be. I mean, when you do what he did, and it was pretty awful, when you do what those kind of people do, you don't ever want to think about the consequences because they're too horrible to imagine. But they are indeed horrible consequences, and that's what he's facing. Um, 23rd February is Brendan's birthday. Looking forward to the legal breakdown. That's good. She's getting sentenced, I think, on the 14th of Valentine's Day. So roses are red, violets are blue. Here, Juliana, the prison's for you. I don't know. Maybe we'll see. I doubt his. I doubt he is sorry. Nothing is his fault. So true. The problem is a better lawyer would be stuck with Banfield as a client. His testimony was undoubtedly a huge contributor to his conviction, and even Carroll probably advised against it. Oh, I'm sure he advised against it. I mean, there's absolutely no way he wanted that to go forward. Um, the it is hard to prepare for questions that you don't anticipate. Some questions are pretty obvious, as far as what you can expect on cross-examination, but others are not. And, the whole idea of why did you bring the child in? Why didn't you call 911? Why didn't you have Juliana call 911? Well, I wasn't thinking about that. Well, obviously, you weren't thinking about your daughter either. When you go up against somebody who is as good as Jenna Sands was in that trial, you'd have to be a Mensa level genius to come away from that looking good, and he is not a Mensa level genius, that's for sure. He almost did get away with it. The digital detective bought it. They let him wash his hands. No statement to the police. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. But again, that's what I would call professional courtesy. They let him do that because he's a cop, not because um, not because it was the proper thing to do. It was a breach of protocol, and I would imagine somebody got suspended over that. Greetings, love your comment. Well, thank you. I appreciate that, Sally Joe. There is a strikingly similar case to Banfield, Illinois versus Mark Winger. I would love to know if Banfield had seen any of the documentaries. Probably a good question. Um, Probably a very good question. You know, the thing I was talking about Jenna Sands, I mentioned in one of my videos about how she obviously did her homework to talk about pre-arrest silence. And I thought that was one of the things he had absolutely no idea was coming. And because he had no idea that it was coming, he kind of blew the answer. He said he was willing to tell the story, but then he didn't. He said, "Well, nobody asked." But again, he had the ability to go in and tell them what he thought had happened. Um, I'm going to go on with this email because I think it's really um, missed my question. Not sure why. Let me go back and look at it, Lisa. Is uh, Do you think the jury in Faust is hang on a second, it scrolled off. Do you think the jury in Faust is growing tired of all the in and out of the defense motions? I think it influences their decision. Yeah, they are probably very tired of going in and out with all of the essential essentially they have to argue the legal motion in front of the judge instead of the jury, and the jury probably is, sort of getting tired of having to jump up and run out, but they're getting plenty of exercise, so maybe they count it as aerobics, I don't know. Sorry, Lisa, I just didn't see it. Otherwise, I would have answered that question. There are 48 hours 2020 and Forensic Files episodes on the Winger case. I'll have to look that up. I watched a video from an ex-convict who thinks Brendan will be a big target in prison due to his work as an IRS agent. Yes, um, the person that Jay Story is talking about there is Jumpsuit Pablo. Um, I don't know if you've seen his channel. He is somebody who spent 10 years in the South Carolina Department of Corrections. He did a lot of work right after the Murdaugh case came out, and that's where I found him. Um, and I do think that he has some interesting views on that. They are probably not going to care that he killed his wife, but I do think they'll care that he was a cop. And like I said, everybody's paid taxes. So and he made the point that a lot of times IRS people are involved in taking down drug gangs and prosecuting them for failing to pay taxes, money laundering, that kind of thing. So again, all good points from him. And if you haven't followed his channel, he's a pretty good follow, I think. Um, Back to her email. Imagine my surprises email. Um, she said, "It's such an own goal, in my opinion. To begin with, it's hypocritical. Who else?" Let me go back. The defense argued that Juliana had the discovery, so she concocted this story based on all the evidence to appease the Commonwealth and get a plea deal. It's an own goal, in my opinion. To begin with, it's hypocritical. Who else had all the discovery before and told their side of before they told their side of the story? Who listened to all the witnesses testify, all the while scribbling notes furiously throughout the trial? Somebody asked me if he was going to get a publisher for that novel. It seems like a bad idea to point this out to a jury, and it probably was. Again, a lot of times you think you just got the greatest sword to use or the greatest shield, and it turns out being a sword coming back to you. It becomes a double-edged sword for the defense. In order for the accusation to be true, Giuliana's testimony must be supported by the evidence. So now you're reminding the jury the evidence supports the Commonwealth's case. It becomes an illogical argument when you contend that she was offered a plea deal, and to do so, she had to agree to go along with the Commonwealth's theory. How did she know what they wanted her to say or that it was the same thing she created from the evidence? Is she suggesting that they told her before the proffer? That sounds illegal, and it is. Or did the police, Commonwealth, and Juliana look at the evidence and arrive at the same story? But they're all wrong? If the assertion is that they had to pin it on someone, why not Christine and Joseph? Doesn't the evidence support that? Wouldn't that be the obvious conclusion from the evidence if that's what actually happened? Again, all great questions. And again, she says, I'm sorry I didn't send this to you in time for the live stream, but actually you did. Now I'm going to take this off my screen so that I can follow the chat. But again, great questions. Anytime anybody has questions and there's going to be a live stream, feel free to email me. I'll put them in my little teleprompter so I can read them without looking away from the screen, and that does seem to help, I think. I ask a question after a long comment under your latest Faust trial video. Sally Joe, I don't remember what that question was, but if you want to put it back up there or just paraphrase it, I'd be happy to answer it. I don't have all of that in front of me, and I have I have the chat open on my monitor above, but I don't have like all of the comments. That's probably something I ought to do before I do another live stream is get all the comments so I could go back and look at some of them. And I'm sorry about that. That's a good point about his testimony. Yeah, I think it is. Question: do you think Juliana will get the full 10 years or less? She'll get less. She's already been in for 2 years. So I would imagine for a first time offender who has never done anything wrong previously, that she would get probably a reasonably light sentence to begin with anyway. And if they give her time served, it will look it'll look a little skeevy, but again, the judge might go along with that. But if she doesn't go along with that, she'd probably hold her in prison or hold her in the county jail until October and then release her, because then she would have served 3 years. And that's fairly close to kind of the minimum sentence for manslaughter. Um, I also assume she'll be deported after serving any sentence. Yes, but she won't have to worry about ICE showing up at her jail cell because Virginia is no longer cooperating with ICE. So she will be deported, and she probably can't wait to get back home. She probably thinks we're all crazy people here in this country. But I have to admit, she was part of the problem. She wasn't part of she was part of the solution, but before she was part of the solution, she was part of the problem. The real question everybody wants answered: how tall is Brendan Banfield? Well, I suspect he's standing a little shorter today than he was previously. Hello from Scotland. Love your channel. Found it recently and I'm binging everything. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Brendan is very tall and his bed is taller than most people prefer. Yeah, I think that's probably right. Um, Brendan is a weird duck. I mean, the idea that you had to replace all of the bedding before all of the, like the furniture in the bedroom after the shooting, in some respects, it looks like maybe he did the right thing because it was such a terrible memory. But more likely than not, he just wanted something new for his playmate. Um, my guess is 6'1", 6'2" from the from my family. Okay. Oh my. Anyway, love to entertain any questions. I did have one other thing that I wanted to talk about, and that is from my list of things. Somebody called out to me that Daisy Link is going to get a new trial, and I posted a video on that today here. That is the craziest thing I've ever heard. It's just mind-numbingly stupid how that happened. Lisa says, I bet his bed in prison won't fit him. Maybe he'll get shorter in prison without his giant birthday cookies of friendship. Yeah, probably not. For those of you who haven't seen that video yet, basically what happened is the prosecutors in closing used pictures as exhibits that had not been admitted into evidence. And the judge tried to cure it with allowing the defense to say something about it, but at the end of the day, he decided that he was going to get reversed on appeal, and he gave her a new trial. So that will be a fun one to follow. Again, for those of you who don't remember, that's the gal who shot her boyfriend as he was running away from her. The bullet hit his heel, deflected up, and wound up in his femoral artery, and so he essentially exsanguinated at the scene. For those of us not in the law and trial world, can you explain why the prosecution in the Faust trial isn't using the recorded interviews and transcripts as evidence? Is it a strategic decision? Probably. And the reason I think probably is because the if you bring in live witnesses who have given their version of events, and then you put them on the stand and get their evidence that way, it comes in a little cleaner than if you just try to get their statements in, because their statements have to meet certain evidentiary requirements. You can use them to impeach a witness if they say something different. So that's what Mr. Cruz tried to do the other day. But again, I suspect that because it took so long to get this case solved and to trial, that there are a lot of other theories in some of those statements where the detectives are trying to follow up on, is this a possibility? Is that a possibility? And the state certainly doesn't want to suggest that there's any other possibility than that this guy did it. So it's probably a strategic decision. I don't think I'll ever eat a crumble cookie ever again. I don't blame you. I left out the rest of my comment. Uh, Sally Joe. Um, it is a strategic decision, like I said. The transcripts, of course, those depend on the accuracy of the person who's taking it down. So one of the things, if you're taking a statement from somebody, and you learn this as a lawyer by going out and taking statements, but one of the things that I would always do when I took a statement is I would introduce in my written part of the statement some error. If they said it was a blue car, I'd put purple car. And then after I got done taking the statement, I'd hand it to him and I'd say, go ahead and read this and make sure I got everything right. And if for some reason they didn't spot that, I would point it out to them. Do I have the color of the car right? And they'd say, oh, no, I said blue. And so I'll scratch through it and I'll have them put their initials on it. And then that way you can say, if they say, well, I didn't read the whole thing, you can say, well, yeah, you did. You read through and you corrected this thing right here. Do you remember doing that? Again, little things that you develop as an attorney for ways of dealing with witnesses who may later decide that another recollection of events is more palatable to them. Um, Wildest ricochet ever. Yes, indeed. It really was. Almost like a higher power intervened. Yeah, I think the higher power was tired of the boyfriend beating him. But I think Daisy kind of takes the fall for that because you can't shoot somebody running away from you. I'm going to get a crumble cookie on February 23rd and celebrate Brendan's first birthday as a convicted felon. I don't blame you. Uh, just coming in late, but I'm excited to hear this. Well, welcome, Andrea. Glad to see you're here. What made you become a lawyer after working in the medical field? That's a good question. I had wanted to be a lawyer ever since I read The Devil and Daniel Webster in grade school. No joke. It was the idea that you could use words to beat an enemy as dastardly as the devil with, and I know it was fiction. Okay, I get that, but that was just powerful to me, and it was one of the reasons why I learned to write really well. I had a journalism teacher who was marvelous. I may have said this before, but his whole thing was you could never start a sentence with a and the or on. And as a result of that, I became a much better writer. And then sort of the world intervened. I went into the military. I spent 6 years in the military. I came out as a combat medic. It made sense to stay in the medical field, so I went to respiratory therapy school, graduated from respiratory therapy school, went on to be a respiratory therapist and then a department manager. And at some point, I just realized it wasn't my calling, that I wasn't doing. I mean, I loved taking care of patients, I really did. And to this day, if I hear an ambulance go down the street, I think, man, I would really like to be in the back of that ambulance, taking care of that patient, intubating them, or in the hospital when they came in, ventilating them. That was sort of who I was for 13 long years. But at the end of the day, I realized it wasn't my calling, that the law was my calling. And I went to law school, and it was the most fun I ever had in a classroom. I loved what I was doing. I loved the work. I loved the intellectual challenge of it. And even though I had 3 kids and I had pretty much sole care of them during the evening hours when I should have been studying, I still managed to come in number 7 in my class, top 3% of my law school graduating class. And I did that because I mean, they say if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life, and that was me. I loved what I was doing in law school. I've loved pretty much every job I've had since then, even though there've been a lot of days in my life when I worked 14, 16-hour days and gone back the next day and did the same thing. So, where did I attend law school? I attended law school at St. Louis University in St. Louis, Missouri. Um, I watched almost the whole trial. It was so disgusting, and I'm so glad he took the stand because he put the final nail in his coffin. Yes, he did. Absolutely true. Um, I'm very curious why those couple of hair envelopes were empty of hair. It's a good question. Also curious why the state is waiting so long to introduce DNA evidence. A lot of times you start big, right? This is what we're going to introduce. You put on your first big witness, but you wait to introduce the most powerful evidence toward the end of the trial because you want that to stick. That's the real glue that holds your case together. So you get that in, and then you turn it over to the defense and you try and close. And it has to do with primacy and recency. You preview it at the front of the trial so that they're expecting it. They're waiting every day for that DNA evidence, and then you give them the DNA evidence, and that's the most recent thing they hear before they go to deliberate. And usually that approach works pretty well. Um, we had a case several years ago where a pulmonologist, of all people, managed to screw up this lady, and she wound up dying because he was pitifully negligent. The poor gentleman is no longer with us. He passed away. But uh, we put on the worst evidence right before we closed, and it was very powerful. I mean, it does have how you structure putting your proof on makes a big difference in the trial world. Um, on day 5, the prosecution tried to object to having witnesses open an evidence envelope on the stand. Starting a sentence with "and" is now considered okay, right? I thought that change was weird. Well, there are a lot of people who do it, and it's not correct from a structural English point of view, from a pure grammar point of view, but it's conversational, and it's conversational English. And I would point out, again, it's conversational. So if you're writing in a conversational tone, you can use it. But lawyers generally try very hard not to write in a conversational tone. We try to write in a very technical tone, um, and try to be as objective as we can possibly be, particularly when we're writing to a court. Um, let's see. How about when the jury dropped one? I'm not sure I understand what that question is. Oh, that was a drop an envelope? Did you think Wendy Edelson will be arrested? I don't think so. And the reason I don't think so is, generally speaking, you don't grant use immunity to somebody that you're going to later come back and prosecute. Um, I think they granted her use immunity with the idea that She's a lawyer. It's going to be really tough to pin this on her because she was smart enough. If you make the assertion that she was somehow involved in this, then you have to assume that she was smart enough to stay out of the conversations where this was all planned. And you have to admit, neither Charlie nor Donna are Mensa level smart. And I think probably Wendy Adelson is a lot smarter than the two of them. Is she guilty? I don't know. If she does get arrested, that's certainly a trial I will follow. I finally caught alive. Hi, good to see you and everyone here. Oh, Carolina, glad to see you. I'm late to the party. I did not receive a notification. Make sure you got the bell thing clicked for, get all notifications. Sometimes that's what happens. But I did post a post on the YouTube earlier today saying there, we'd have this live stream. Blessed Sabbath to all. Thank you. That's good. Um, the jury dropped one of the broken slides. Oh, interesting. I didn't realize that. With what I do, when I select something to talk about, usually it's an evidentiary issue or a legal issue, uh, some kind of drama that occurred during the trial, like that whole Russia thing yesterday. Um, I will block out that part of the trial and I will look at that part and I will spend the majority of my time making sure I get that right. And then if I have time, I go back and watch the rest of whatever I can see of the trial. Um, and then if Law and Crime or Court TV have clipped certain portions of the trial, I will look at those. Although I try really hard not to borrow those videos because they've already done it. But that way, at least I know if something unusual happened. But again, it's just a function of not having enough time and wanting to put out a really good product for you guys. I would love to be able to have enough time to watch an entire trial in a day, but if I did that, several things would happen. One, I wouldn't have time for my wife, and my wife is very important to me. I love her to death, and I just, if it's a choice between doing a video on the air or spending time with her, I'm going to elect to spend time with her every day, and that's what vows mean. And you honor them, or you don't at your own peril. If you don't, so um, your post is what brought me here. Sometimes I miss my notifications, so as I was scrolling, finding something to watch, I saw your post. So I'll say it's a good backup to have a warning as a post. That's a pretty good idea. The Faust trial is making me wonder how we can distinguish between a cold case, which means to me that the circumstances are challenging for the detectives, and a botched investigation. Well, that's another good question because a lot of times there are botched investigations. It happens every day. You look at that. Who is that guy that Casotis, the guy in Georgia who did what he did to his wife and buried her in a bunch of different places? Um, I think that investigation was botched. They were lucky to get a conviction there. Um, you know, Cops have a difficult job, and it's like the mythical Joe Friday said, "It's a glamorous, thankless job that's got to be done, and nobody wants to do it." And I, there are, particularly in today's environment where they're talking about defunding the police, and every other day you're seeing a shooting or somebody shooting at a cop. If you follow any of the badge cam videos, there, you can really see how dangerous that line of work is. So again, it's not something that I think people appreciate as much. But detectives should be more deliberative. They should have more time, and a lot of places set up cold case squads just to go after cold cases, because a lot of times the only time you develop the good information is after people have forgotten about it, and then they speak sort of out of turn, and then you develop leads and you can go after somebody. But again, when you do that, pretty much the gold standard now for a cold case is DNA. And of course, one of the ways they're going about getting that is through this genealogical DNA, which I think raises a whole lot of privacy issues, at least for me. Um, I listen to trials at 1.5 or 2 times speed to get through it quicker. I'm single, so I watch it as a hobby. Well, Lisa, that's a great idea. And I do that a lot of times on the badge cam videos, particularly. Uh, I keep hitting the right side of my iPad when I'm watching the chase videos because, what starts the chase is interesting and what ends the chase is interesting, but the geography between that and the end is not all that interesting. Um, oh, I would say I'm the lucky guy. My wife isn't really lucky. She's stuck with me, but I'm lucky. I am absolutely lucky. Karen Reed was botched. Yeah, boy, why didn't I miss that one? That's the one that was completely botched. Do you think the jury will find Edrick Faust guilty? I've been watching his trial, and it's wild how the judge treats the defense attorney. Again, it is wild how the defense is getting treated, but a lot of that is due to the defendants, or to the defense attorney's actions in the court. You know, it's okay to be disappointed when you make what you think is a really good objection to a piece of evidence to keep it out, and the judge rules against you. It's kind of like, darn. But what you have to learn to do in court is, keep that under wraps. As my wife would say, it's okay to think it, it's not okay to say it. And unfortunately, he seems very interested in saying things like that. And I I don't understand. I think he's just over his head. And she's getting tired of having to send the jury out. She's getting tired of him not following the rules. He should have filed a 412 motion if he wanted to get that evidence in. And even if he didn't think it was 412 evidence, because you try very hard to cover all your bases, he should have filed the motion. So I don't know if he's overworked. I don't know if he's understaffed. I'm not sure what's going on there. I think he's trying as hard as he can for his client. Um, and yeah, the judge could probably be a little more understanding. Um, but I don't know that I would have dealt differently with any of the legal questions that came up, but I'd have to think about it. I really would. I would tend to be much more lenient with a younger lawyer than I would be with somebody like Mr. Carroll. Judge Penny with Mr. Carroll she was peaches. I mean, she treated him really well, even though he was sort of disorganized. Well, massively disorganized at one point. Let's see. I'm missing things again. At this point, the only way I think Faust is guilty is solid DNA. Yeah, they have to have solid DNA, but I would think they didn't bring the case if they didn't have solid DNA. Fictitious Jim McIntyre. Yeah. Um, I love listening to you explain stuff. You are so good at making things clear. Well, here's the thing about making things clear. If you can't take a concept like impeachment and make it understandable, then you yourself don't understand it well enough. And so before I start down the path of trying to explain something, a lot of times I'll go read up on it. I will read up on the proper procedure. It's been probably a couple of years since I've impeached somebody in a courtroom. And so I go back, look it up, and do the research, and then I produce the video. And I think that's the right way to do it. Again, the content on here has to be good for people to enjoy coming back, and I want people to enjoy coming back. Why the defense did not file a motion for the 412 motion? Again, I don't have any idea why they didn't do that other than just being overworked or potentially not thinking it was covered by 412. And there is an argument for that, and he will probably wind up making it on appeal. And I wish him the best of luck on that. Again, because judges have discretion and because she has offered to entertain the motion even though it's not timely, I think that's a pretty bad appellate point. But we'll try. I would, if I were him, I'd sure try it. Faust lawyer reminds me of Alicia Andrews' lawyer. Doesn't like the rulings and can't hide it. We have to learn to hide it. If you're going to be successful as a trial attorney, you have to be able to hide it. Um, I've had things go bad for me in trial, and I've had rulings that go against me that I didn't think should have gone against me. But, at the end of the day, I knew the judge and I knew that he was doing his best to be fair to both sides. So you take it on the nose and let it go at that. Why is it so hard to get judges in trouble when they show obvious bias? Because what's obvious bias to you may not be obvious bias to the judicial commission that reviews those complaints. It may it may be explainable. In other words, the judge, when he makes his response to a complaint that's filed with the judicial commission, may say, these are the things that were uh, not transparent to the person who filed the complaint. And he'll lay out his reasoning, usually in more detail than he did in court. And the commission will say, it's his discretion. He didn't abuse his discretion. And that's the end of that story. So uh, I got into this in my comment about the Faust trial. There are racial undertones. I don't want to derail the conversation, but the environment seems to be causing him a lot of stress. Oh yeah, I think that's true. I do think there are racial undertones. The individual who was killed was white, and he is an African American, and as a result of that, there you couldn't help but have that kind of racial undertone. But if you look at the team that is trying the case, um, it's a mixed team, black and white, and again, I think they are trying to take that issue off the table by balancing their prosecution team. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it's Georgia. He's an African American defendant. There are going to be racial undertones in any case like that. And I think you just take it on head on in voir dire and say, we have to put all of that beside it, have to put it away. If the prosecution says something about the defendant, it's not meant as a comment on everybody else who has the same skin color as him. And then you have to hope that the jury does what they're supposed to do, which is decide the case on the facts and not because somebody looks like a criminal or because they are an African American or because they're Hispanic or whatever. It, it's it the whole thing of trying cases is it's like a I don't know, it's like playing five-dimensional tic-tac-toe. It's you really have to think about a lot of different things, a lot of moving parts at every point. Um, well, hard work makes a difference and it shows. That's true. Um, let's see. I can't remember who said it, that if you can't make difficult concepts clear and understandable, it's a sign of not being as smart as you think you are. Yeah. And a lot of people try to explain something, and by the time they're done, they're more confused than you are. So I try not to be that guy. I guess I wouldn't be a success as a trial attorney because even if I shut my mouth, the rest of my face speaks for me. Yeah, there's a t-shirt that said, "Did I just roll my eyes out loud?" Because, sometimes it's an autonomic reflex. "Oh, I can't believe he ruled that way." But you can't let the judge see it, and you can't let the jury see it either. Um, wouldn't he have to reveal how he is using the evidence and the line of questioning in his 412 motion? Probably because he's got to establish a factual predicate for it. And in the case of where he was talking about, the Mexican restaurant, he would have to show that there was some way for those bodily fluids to get into her body at a Mexican restaurant. And, um, like I said, it'd have to be a pretty wild Mexican restaurant. Somebody commented on my illustrations. Um, I use an AI tool, OpenArt AI, to do a lot of this, and I tell it to draw a cartoon. And usually they never disappoint. I mean, sometimes you have to do it 3 or 4 times to get the right image, but I have a lot of fun doing that. And I hope you guys have a lot of fun looking at that. Um, you said the judge is entertaining a motion even though it's late, but it seems to me that she entertains it for show, for future appeal, knowing full well she will deny anything the defense presents. And that certainly could be. You know, um, judges tend to be protective of their record on appeal. And If a judge really wants to hurt you, she will let you make all the record you want to make. She won't restrict you at all. You'll never get hit with a contempt citation. Um, I think if I had been the judge, I wouldn't have fined him for that contempt. I would have held him in contempt. I would have fined him $100 and I would have said, give this to the home for homeless cats or whatever, give it to a charity. Um, I would not have gone as hard as she did, but she was trying to make a point. But now, of course, he can claim that every ruling after that was based on animus because she didn't like the way he had violated these orders. And of course, he's going to have a problem anyway because now it looks like he may have an ethical violation for disobeying a direct order of a tribunal, and that's not a good thing either. And you may be right. I make no call on that because I haven't seen enough of this trial yet to really be able to speak to it. Um, but I did think she was awfully sharp with him on that part. She did let him go ahead and get his impeachment done once he'd figured out how to do it. Um, just listening and lurking, commenting to help the algorithm. Well, thank you, Jen the Couch Fairy. I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing some photos. I enjoy your channel and common sense approach to the law. Well, common sense is pretty much the only way to approach the law. Although sometimes there are things in the law that make absolutely no sense. Oh, somebody super chatted. Well, thank you. Lisa, thank you. I appreciate it. Uh, Listen, I do for you guys, but you guys do way more for me. Trust me on that one. I appreciate everything you guys do. Um, did you know those flying hearts really help this channel get into the algorithm? If you don't mind, please try it. Well, thank you. See me sharp. I appreciate it. Hello, everyone. I'm late. Well, Ruth Ann, that's okay. It's okay to be late. Um, that's how I feel she is being, allowing him to do it, but deny everything. I had a similar experience with a judge in Kansas City, and my boss took me aside afterward and told me, basically that it wasn't that he didn't like me, it was that he didn't like my arguments. To this day, I still don't necessarily believe that because he acted like he really hated me, but at least he didn't hold me in contempt. The contempt was not a good way to start. He tried to have her recused again. That's absolutely true. Um, you should see it. It's pretty scary, and it was. Hey, people listening from Denmark while knitting. Oh, how cool! Uh, we were in Copenhagen in 2000, and what a neat place that is. Um, I like Europe. I like Europe a lot. When proceeding pro se, does the court and legal community look down on the plaintiff? Um, the legal community, yes. The judge is not supposed to. But the judge is hamstrung in certain respects. With pro se plaintiffs, just like with pro se defendants, he has to rule a motion. And when the person says, well, why did you deny that motion? He'll have to say, you didn't follow the rule. What rule? Sorry, sir, you have to look that up because he can't help one side or another because then he stops being the neutral arbiter in the case. So while he may have a great deal of sympathy for a pro se plaintiff or a pro se defendant, he can't show it directly at that point because it would be taking sides and he can't do that. But lawyers, lawyers either love or hate pro se people. If the judge is one of the people who gives the pro se plaintiff or pro se defendant the benefit of the doubt, which sometimes happens, then you'll make a great legal argument and the judge will come back and say, well, aren't you being a little hard on him? Can't you guys work this out? So you can find lawyers who just absolutely hate to deal with pro se. I look at it as a learning opportunity for them, and I try and suggest to them, look, this is a situation where you really need legal help. One of the reasons why I worked for the Samaritan Center in Jefferson City was because so many people can't afford a lawyer. And so on there, we have a way where we can help them as sort of like standby counsel. so that when they have a problem, they can come ask us, how do I handle this problem? And we can help them with that. And that's a good way to ameliorate that kind of prejudice. And I think I wish more places had that kind of thing. Um, let's see, do you think it influences a judge during trial when you seek to recuse them? Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know how it couldn't. You're basically saying, I think you're biased. And if the judge is trying hard not to be biased, he's probably a little offended by that. But of course, he can't let that show and he can't let it affect his rulings. And if he does, then he creates appellate issues, and that's not a good thing. Um, I didn't know that about the side hearts. Well, I didn't either. Definitely going to town on them now. Well, good. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's also been said that Faust's lawyer could be using AI law citations. If he's smart, he's not doing that. Um, a lot of times, just because I don't want to have to pay Westlaw to go do research, I will use AI to find a case, well, particularly a SCOTUS case, because all SCOTUS cases are available online for free. So I'll find the SCOTUS case and then I'll go read the SCOTUS case to make sure that the AI thing actually got it right, because there are a lot of times when it doesn't. And if you ever see a citation in a brief that says 456 Southwest 123, you can be darn sure that's an AI site, because that's one of the things that should tip you off. Anyway, I hope he isn't using AI, because it's not a smart thing to do. And if he is it, I mean, that's ineffective assistance of counsel. You have to rely on your knowledge of the law and your research. You can't let a computer do it for you. He would not be the first one improperly using AI in the law. Well, that's true too. He could join the long list of people who have made complete idiots out of themselves using AI. And AI now has developed to the point where it's reasonably reliable. It's in the 80% range, I would say. But long term, it may get to 90%, but as somebody pointed out, you can't you can't figure out the nuances from that. The nuances in the law are the thing that really make a big difference. There can be a case that's pretty close to on point that you would think would just kill the other side. But if you don't pay attention to the nuances, like, for example, there's a big difference between a motion to dismiss and a motion for summary judgment. If it's decided on a motion for summary judgment, it's much stronger law than if it's decided on a motion to dismiss. Those are just things you have to know, and those are distinctions you can make that sometimes will sway a judge one way or the other. And that's where AI is just not as good as people think that it is. You're never going to replace a human brain. Um, Pro se seems like it would be very disruptive, and it can be. You'll see on here some of the court channels where they, show Judge Simpson, for example, people who come in pro se and think they're going to run the court, and they wind up going out in handcuffs. Greetings from Philly. Ah, yes. I have a good friend in Philly, uh, Mr. Mr. Don Haviland, who is a great lawyer, a Philadelphia lawyer, and we worked together on a couple of cases, and he's just a great guy. So if anybody needs a plaintiff's attorney in Philadelphia, he'd be the guy to go to. Let's see. I'm still an Eagles fan, originally from Delaware. Ah, Eagles, my favorite band. Pro se for a civil matter, there are very few resources here in Indiana. Have you looked at Nolo Press, Sally? Nolo Press has a lot of different resources. They're not state specific, but they can give you a little bit of a gentle push in the right direction for knowing where to look. And most of the state appellate courts and certainly your state Supreme Court should have a huge law library that should be free for you to use. And in some counties, they have a law library in the courthouse that you can use. Um, and of course, you can get a subscription to, or actually a pay for use for Westlaw and LexisNexis, and do research that way. I'm sick of the Guthrie case. There are so many people out there who are missing, especially black or brown people and indigenous people. Well, the Guthrie case has traction because of Savannah Guthrie. That's probably the only reason you're hearing about it, as opposed to any John Doe that you might be out there that might be out there missing. And it's a function of people in the media have more power than people who are not in the media. Is it fair? Absolutely not. But it's reality. So I can understand why you might be sick of it. The sovereign citizen pro se defendants are humorous. Yes, they are. I enjoy them. I really enjoy your channel and your animations are really fun. Thank you. Watching from Wasco, Wisconsin. It's finally in the 20s and not below zero. Well, that's got to feel good. You know, I have a son-in-law who spent a winter in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and he said he was never going back because people made a choice to live there. And he's not wrong, but he just didn't like the idea that you had to put a device inside the the radiator system to keep your radiator water from freezing. You know, the little electric pump or electric heater that you have to put in there. He said, you know, if you have to do that, that's just not a place I want to live. And he's still down here in the South. And I like Judge Simpson too. There are pro bono estate attorneys to help with wills and trusts. Yes, if you don't have a will, you should absolutely get a will. There's software available to do it called Willmaker, but I wouldn't trust it. You know, pay the $200. Pardon me. Pay the $200 and go to a lawyer. Pardon me. I have to drown my sorrows in Diet Coke. Ah, the nectar of the gods could not be so sweet. Uh, the media has taken the Guthrie investigation off point, and the unsophisticated sheriff contributed to the mess. Yes, he did. Just remember to ask if it's lawful law. If you go, if you go sovereign citizen. Yeah, yeah, I love it. Woohoo! Wisconsin got a heat wave. 20 degrees. I don't know. I'd consider 20 degrees a heat wave, but Mary Kay, I'm glad that it's up in the 20s and not below zero. Uh, bless you. Well, thank you. Um, so at any rate, there is, I was really annoyed that I couldn't get to that Daisy Link motion for new trial or for the order for a new trial, but I didn't want to become a Florida lawyer. So um, I thought that would have been an interesting one to look at. One thing that I wanted to talk about, just really, sent you a super chat for a Coke. There you go. Thank you. That was Lisa. She sent me a super chat. And you know, Diet Cokes now are like 250, 275. It's amazing. Will we ever get to meet the Mrs.? Well, I don't know. I will ask her at some point if she will come back here. But she is she's busy at the moment doing some things that she likes doing in the sewing room, so I'm probably not going to bother her today. Um, Vent Baby 2.0 is going to be good. How can a party be certain that all discovery from their opponent is provided? You can never be certain. But what you can do is look for gaps in documents. Um, Most of the time when you get discovery, it'll be bait stamped and it'll be bait stamped one up. So if you're going through document and you're at 1123, 1124, and then it goes to 1129, you know that somebody pulled a bunch of documents out of the submission. And so you can ask for those documents. And if they are privileged in some way, then you ask for a privilege log and you go argue that they're not privileged. The attorney-client privilege is grossly abused by attorneys everywhere to hide documents they don't want you to have. And a lot of times, if you can get an in-camera review by the judge, they will be released to you. We've we've had this happen, I mean, literally thousands of times. In the case that we had in bankruptcy court in Delaware, the other side just hid documents willy-nilly, and the judge was not really interested in pursuing them. Um, he just wanted to get the case done. He didn't want a lot of drama, so he didn't give us. I mean, there's a lot of discovery we didn't get there. Um, it was, I I believe that was one of those judges who, one of the reasons I can believe that this judge in the Faust case might be dealing unfairly with Mr. Cruz is because we've been dealt with unfairly ourselves in cases that we've handled. Um, will the crime scene being will the crime scene being closed then opened then closed again, et cetera, be a factor in court should this case get to trial? Absolutely, just the way it was in Karen Reed. How do you know that the crime scene that you went into, 6 months later wasn't tampered with? There's no way to know that. Um, in your opinion, what are Puffy chants on appeal? I'm not sure what you're talking about there, but if you want to explain, I'd be happy to answer. Referring to the Guthrie case. Yeah. That okay, I'm sorry. I thought you were referring to the Edrick Faust case. No, I think that's right. I'm not sure they thought it was a crime scene initially, although they certainly should have recognized the blood out front. Um, but yeah, if they ever get the person and there's not a confession, there's going to be a problem with that. It's amazing sometimes. Again, cops are human, they make mistakes. It's the reason they put erasers on the end of pencils. Uh, Sad but true. One thing I wanted to talk about just real briefly was if you ever have a question about something that comes up in a trial, like, for example, this impeachment issue, he didn't impeach him right, didn't lay the right foundation. How do you get an answer to that without waiting for me? Well, the federal rules of evidence are available online. Now, Georgia doesn't use the federal rules, but the rules they use are about 95% the federal rules. So you go to the federal rules and you search for whatever word it would be, impeach or impeachment. I would use impeach. And you look through it and you find the rule that governs the situation that you're in, and you read that rule. And usually there'll be a couple of cases that are cited in most of these things, and you go and read those cases, and sometimes that will make it more clear. The same thing with motions. Somebody's filed a motion to dismiss. Well, the federal rules of civil procedure are online, and you can go look at the rules and figure out, again, what the process is, and sometimes that's helpful. Did you have a listen at the Charlie appeal session? I saw it, but I didn't actually listen to it. There were a lot of other people covering that, and Charlie doesn't have a good chance on appeal. I mean, he just doesn't. Um, he had his girlfriend testify against him. Uh, his mom had that event with the guy who came and, told him that he was with the gang and he wanted money, and she blew that event. And they got a lot of stuff in that they probably shouldn't have gotten in. But I don't think that it's going to be overturned. That's right there in Tallahassee, and of course the Florida Supreme Court's right there in Tallahassee, and I don't see them overturning that conviction. I just don't. Uh, Puffy equals Sean Combs. Oh, again, I'm Sean Combs. Are you thinking, is that P. Diddy? Is that who we're talking about? Um, I don't know. I'm sure they will probably appeal. I'd have to wait for the brief to know what his chances are. Um, Usually, if you know how to get to them, you can get to the brief in a federal case like that, and you can certainly look at the motions and stuff that were filed in the court, and that'd be the way to assess what his chances are on appeal. Could you do a video about Luigi Mangione claiming double jeopardy with the state and federal charges? Um, yes, I can do that. In fact, I did a video on Luigi Mangione and the motion to and the dismissal of two of the federal claims, the two that were death penalty eligible. And the judge did a good job with that one. She absolutely got that one right. Um, it probably feels wrong because you want that guy to pay, but she absolutely got that question right and reached the right result for the right reason. Um, but I have a video that I've been working on, I've been editing, I've been trying to make sure that it doesn't have any political overtones. But if you had to guess, how many law schools have judges on the Supreme Court? There are 9 judges. How many schools put those 9 judges on the Supreme Court? I'll wait for a few minutes to see if somebody can get me the numbers or make guesses as to the numbers. Just guess. It's going to be less than 9. I'll give you a hint. It's less than 9. I bet Charlie thinks he has an excellent chance. Yeah, I'm sure he does. Then again, he was dumb enough to let his mom talk him into this. 0. Oh, no, that's the wrong 6. Nope, probably 3. And that, my friends, is the right answer. We have 4 judges on the Supreme Court who are from Harvard, 4 from Yale, and Amy Coney Barrett is from Notre Dame. So, in academia, they have what's called an anti-inbreeding policy. So if you go to St. Louis University, for example, and you get a master's degree in counseling, and you want to teach at St. Louis University, you have to go to another university and get your PhD somewhere else because they won't hire you if your terminal degree, the last degree that you get, is from St. Louis University because it's inbreeding. And unfortunately, we don't have that same policy on the Supreme Court. It's like whenever the presidents or the senators go to announce their picks for the Supreme Court, they always go to the same 2 places, Harvard and Yale. And I think that's terribly bad. I think it's inbreeding, and we need to figure out a way to stop it. Um, the appellate attorney for Letitia Stock presented their case for a new trial. What are your thoughts about them requesting a new trial because one of the jurors is related to one of the prosecutors? Hmm, how close of a relationship is it? Um, if it's a close enough relationship, if you're talking about third cousin twice removed, not a chance in the world. But if you're talking about first cousin, second cousin, um, you know, somebody who has been to family reunions, somebody who has had dinner over at the prosecutor's house, that is probably going to be a problem for the state, and they should get a new trial. I was going to say Harvard, Yale, and Columbia, but no, Columbia doesn't have anybody on there. It's Harvard, Yale, and Notre Dame. Educational inbreeding. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, look it up. Google academic inbreeding policies. And what you'll find is most of the larger universities, the ones that are highly credentialed, don't allow academic inbreeding. You have to get your terminal degree from another institution. Um, did they know they were related at the time of trial? Yeah, there is an issue of waiver, right? If the defense knew they were related at the time of trial, then again, you've got a waiver issue, right? But because they could have raised it before the jury had been impaneled. But if they didn't know it, and if the prosecutor knew it and didn't disclose it, well, then you got prosecutorial misconduct, and she will probably they'll probably dismiss the case for prosecutorial misconduct because everybody knows that's wrong. Um, some think education can be more indoctrination, depending. Well, I have seen those kinds of claims made. That's true. Judge Warner knew about the juror and did nothing about it. I hear that we don't have anything to worry about. Uh, Again, it depends on how close that relationship was and whether the prosecutor knew it, whether the juror should have disclosed it. Um, one of the things that I always did in my voir dire was, my name's Tony DeWitt. I'm with law firm of, whatever law firm I was with. And then I would say, does anybody know me? Does anybody know me from when I was a respiratory therapist? Does anybody know me from all the writing I've done as a respiratory therapist? Does anybody know me from all the writing I've done as a lawyer? I would go into that because you want to find that out. If they know you, you don't want them on the jury. I mean, you may want them on the jury, but you're an idiot if you put them on there. And that's just bad. Did you watch the Karen Reed trial, and do you think the judge showed a lot of bias toward the prosecution? She showed a lot of bias against the defense, and she was very much in favor of the prosecution. If you look at the sidebars, and I've listened to some of the sidebars that were conducted. I thought about making a video on it, but I didn't want to steal the work of the trial channel. I thought they did a really good job with that. Um, the uh, the sidebars just indicate that she's a control freak and that she absolutely handcuffed the defense every way she could possibly do it, and in ways that weren't obvious to people who were watching the trial. Um, the sidebars really are bad. Yes, yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah. Um, she is an awful judge. She should not be a judge. Um, there should be there should be complaints filed against that woman, and I can't wait to see the sidebars from the second trial either, because again, they're going to be probably much more explosive than the ones that came out of the first trial. Well, guys, we've been going on here for almost an hour and a half. Anybody else have any questions they need me to answer? Donna Donna Adelson's master plan came back and bit her and Charlie's behind. That's absolutely true. Trial Channel will allow user reviews to react to them as long as credit is given. Trial Channel is awesome. Well, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Um, she is an awful judge, so corrupt. Yes, I was impressed with Mr. Jackson, though, particularly his cross-exam of the experts. Well, that's somebody who has been cross-examining experts for a long time and understands what's going on. The beach behind me is Miramar Beach in Miramar Beach, Florida. It's if you've been down there, it's really close to a place called Pompano Joe's. So that's that's where that's from. Let's see. Get that off of here. Well, that was clever. There we go. Um, I would love to hear your thoughts on some of the sidebars. That's why the Trial Channel does these videos for you guys to make your amazing comments. Okay. Well, I will go see if I can download some of that video and work on that. Um, thank you so much. You guys are welcome. You don't have to thank me. You're being here and participating and asking questions and making these live streams come alive. That's what makes it fun for me. That's what makes it fun for everybody else. Thank you. It's a distant cousin. I appreciate you answering my question. A distant cousin should have been disclosed, but that's really going to be up to an appellate court. If I were sitting on the appellate court, I'd send it back. Especially if the judge knew and the prosecutor knew, I'd send it back. And I'd say, do it again and do it right this time. They're probably fortunate I'm not on an appellate court. I thought Jenna Sands was excellent. Yes, I thought she was terrific. If uh, if she winds up opening a defense practice, people will flock to her. Thank you so much anyway, giving us your time. Well, thank my wife because my wife made it possible for me to do this. She had to cut her shopping trip at uh, the little place where she shops for knickknacks. She had to cut that short so I could make it home. So she's the one who really deserves the thanks today. Um, I don't have a question. I just want to say thank you for being so informative. Happy to do it. I think Donna Adelson and Brendan Banfield are the same person in different bodies. Good riddance to both of them. Well, they're both going to be where they should be, in a little, 9 by 5 cell, looking out a steel door once every or 3 times a day when they come to check on them. Uh, what is what if Truealee is simply bad tech? It's proprietary, no one knows. That's the case, I would think that if you're gonna use it as evidence, you have to establish that it is good, and if you can't do that because they have some, uh, limit on what you can know about it, then my opinion on that is it ought to be subject to a Daubert challenge, and it ought to be stricken. Um, well, thank you for telling me I do a good job. I appreciate that. That means a lot, and I will pass your thanks along to Ginger. She will appreciate that. Jenna Sands was a defense attorney, and you can see why. She's very good at what she does. I will definitely thank my lovely wife. So we've gone for an hour and a half. Thanks again, everybody. I'm going to put up the ending soon thing so that if you guys have things you want to say back and forth to one another, I'll give you a few minutes to do that, and then we'll do this again hopefully next week. Judge who presided over Karen Reed trials was transferred out of her role in Norfolk not long after the retrial was moved to a civil session in Plymouth. Yeah, I'm glad I'm not trying civil cases in Plymouth then. All right. See you guys next time.